people getting their dessert. We have a few people finishing up their dinner, so I apologize to interrupt to the end of your meal. But we want to make sure we get through our short program for you and get you off to your next agenda item this evening. Many of you may be going on to something over at the institution or somewhere else, so we want to keep moving along. This year, 2016, is the Jackson Center's 15th year of promoting liberty under law through the examination of the life and work of U.S. Supreme Court Justice Robert H. Jackson and its relevance to current events and issues. The work we do is quite varied. We develop and present exhibits and educational programs for the entire spectrum of ages. We facilitate research, we provide college internship experiences, and much, much more. Through our initiatives, collaborations, and strategic partnerships, we touch literally tens of thousands of lives, locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally. Overall, we are educators, expanding awareness and informing the dialogues taking place in classrooms, at community and corporate leadership tables, and within institutions of higher learning and public policy in our region, across the nation, and around the world. Tonight, our college interns will share with you an overview of the research projects on which they've been working. Co-founder and board member Greg Peterson will give us a look at the past and on into the future for the Jackson Center. Board member Cole Stearns, our immediate past chair of our development committee, will speak about our annual fund campaign and the Jackson Ambassador Program, and we will conclude with closing remarks from our chair, Doug Neckers. Our first intern to speak will be Amelia Buger. Emmy hails from Warren, Pennsylvania, and is a rising sophomore at University of Massachusetts in Amherst, majoring in international relations with a minor in political science. Emmy is working in our archives this summer, assisting archives and exhibits manager Jennifer Champ, and focusing a large portion of her time on the Nuremberg trials. Emmy?
This year we tried something new. It was the opportunity the Jackson Center gave me to coordinate the academic research of our three very talented young people here that I will start to introduce to you in a moment. But I spent 10 years in college to get my degree so I could spend 30 years teaching. And it has been a wonderful time because I get to work with very bright, talented young people who constantly impress me. And the summer went by way too quickly. We would meet weekly, and the three of them impressed me greatly. I always say to my students that I know I do my job when you do better than I do, and when we're talking, you teach me things that I hadn't thought about. And that was certainly the case with Angela, Jacob, and Heather. I just, in fact, finished reading the final copies of 2 of their papers and prompted even more thoughts. So I think what you're going to hear is some remarkable work done by some remarkable young people. And as we met early on in the summer, we came up with sort of a theme because we decided to look at Jackson's early life and how that affected his career. And then we looked at how his career affected what he did on the Supreme Court. And then finally we looked at how Jackson's legacy is still very much alive with us today. In fact, in front of the Supreme Court of the United States, where Jackson's opinions keep coming up in all sorts of fascinating ways. And so Jackson's legacy, Jackson died obviously way too soon, but his legacy lives on. And the only other thing I would like to add before I turn it over to our young people, a lot of people say to me, aren't you pessimistic about the future? And as I get older and closer to maybe retiring, not that I'm having too much fun, my response is I'm never pessimistic, because as long as we have people like Angela, Jacob, and Heather, bright young people who are articulate and well thought and write beautifully, and have an interest in Robert Jackson and the court and the law, I don't worry about the future at all. So with that, let me introduce to you Angela, who's going to talk a little bit about Jackson's early career.
Hello everyone, my name is Angela Maroney and I am from New Kensington, Pennsylvania. I'm a resident senior at Allegheny College and I'm an English major with minors in political science, journalism, and history. After being notified of my selection as an intern at the Robert H. Jackson Center, I began looking for what I would spend my time researching. I tried sifting through information about Jackson and found, of course, his incredible legacy as chief prosecutor at the Nuremberg trials and his part in establishing the International Military Tribunal. I also found the significant Supreme Court opinions he famously penned himself, which always took into account the effects they would have on real-life people, at once advocating for civil liberties while maintaining a safe society. While I read some about his early life and career, I couldn't help but wonder how he had gotten to where he was, and what made a man with such an eye for justice. The individualism instilled in him at an early age manifested to give him a drive for defending the underdog, as well as allow him to possess the foresight to see how his actions and the actions of others would have long-standing effects on civil liberties. The interactions he had with everyone from his grandfather to his educators shaped him to be an individual and an advocate for justice. Generationally, Jackson's predecessors valued and maintained independence and self-reliance that they eventually instilled in him. They taught him to listen and consider the opinions of those around him, but never fall into blind agreements, and never act only to appease others. Even his first exposure to law showed him justices who considered everyone when making decisions. Throughout his early life, Jackson grew to view individualism and thoughtfulness as signs of success, using such phrases frequently as praise for people he admired. The people and companies Jackson chose to represent when he became an attorney reflect the individualism his early life had taught him to value. From unpopular clients and underdogs to cases he simply found interesting, Jackson always maintained a variety of clients and never aimed to serve just one person. Instead, he strove to achieve a level of independence that allowed him to serve in the most just way he could. While this time in Jackson's life was just the start of his legacy, it is what eventually led him to all of the incredible feats he would later accomplish. For Researching this somewhat unexplored part of his life has been both eye-opening and experience-building, and I want to personally thank the team at the Robert H. Jackson Center for all of their help, Professor Greg Rabb for his supervision, and I want to thank everyone here for their contributions that made it all possible. This summer has been entirely unforgettable, and I will always appreciate the time I've had here. Now I'll pass it on to Jacob Sandstrom, my fellow intern, whose research surrounded Jackson's time on the court.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jacob Sandstrom. I am from Jamestown, New York, and I am a rising sophomore political science major at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. So moving from Jackson's early days, my summer has focused on his court opinions and to what degree they evidence his views of freedom of thought, speech, and action. In my research notes, 4 realizations. First, Justice Jackson had a firm belief in intellectual individualism. To quote Jackson in American Communications Association versus Dowds, thoughtful, bold, and independent minds are essential to wise and considered self-government. Progress generally begins in skepticism about accepted truths. Second, consensus among individuals establishes what items are socially valuable and what items are not. So, thinking independently also involves a level of tolerance for the opinions of others. This balance, similar to that of liberty and order, fascinated Jackson and was evident in numerous opinions. Third, there is a practical continuum of thought, speech, and action. When speech and action exist independent of thought, herd-mindedness leads to atrocious behavior. Now, Nazi Germany was but one example of senselessness arising from tactless speech and action, which leads into my final point, that Nuremberg solidified Justice Jackson's views of liberty and the value of free, independent thought. In my paper, I call this phenomenon the Nuremberg paradigm. At first, I thought that if Jackson used definitive words after Nuremberg, it would prove the paradigm. But quantifying his word was a bit unsuccessful. However, I did note that Jackson changed how he used these definitive words. And one such example is the word must. As opposed to before the trials, Jackson used these words to demonstrate a philosophical understanding of society and the citizen. My paper leaves the paradigm open-ended, as there's plenty of room for further research. And finally, I take this opportunity to thank the Jackson Center, Professor Rabb, and the fellow interns. It's been a fantastic summer, researching and learning and interacting with so many amazing people. And I thank all of you as well. Your contributions to the center made this all possible. So I thank you so much, and thank you for letting me speak to you tonight.
Good evening. My name is Heather Bosa. I'm from Mentor, Ohio, and I attend Allegheny College, where I'm a rising senior, with an English major and a social justice and legal studies minor. Before I begin, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone at the Robert H. Jackson Center for making this summer and the research I'm about to present to you today possible. I have learned so much during my time here. My research is focused primarily on the ways in which Justice Jackson continues to influence contemporary iterations of the Supreme Court. I focused on 2 primary methods, his majority decisions and his concurring decisions, as they are cited in and used to justify contemporary cases while leaving room open for further research into the continued relevance of his dissents. My findings were clear regarding my initial question of if Justice Jackson did continue to influence the court. To that, I can say an emphatic yes. The deeper question I have found is why. Traditional legal scholars tend to argue that majority decisions alone carry the full weight of the law, and yet 2 of the cases I studied were concurrences. They had equal, if not more, influence on their contemporary counterparts than the majority decision in Wicker v. Filburn, with 1, the Youngstown sheet and tube concurrence, being arguably one of the most important issuances of the Supreme Court from Jackson's era. Inquiries into this why question have come to suggest that Jackson's foresight, something he is praised for during any tour you might receive at the Robert H. Jackson Center, is key to an answer. Jackson wrote by citing the past, deciding a case in the present, and offering guidelines for the future. His cases were not arrested in any one historical moment, and his legal experience, coupled with that of his legal acumen, allowed him to see beyond the politics of the moment, as in Youngstown, and the situation of the moment, as in his concurrence in Edwards, in which he wholeheartedly agreed with the result of the majority's decision, but hesitated to accept its reasoning. In that case, he argued an alternate legal theory, which allowed people the right to travel not by the Commerce Clause, which he found to be dehumanizing, but instead in the 14th Amendment, and thus a core tenet of American citizenship. It was this argument that a later version of the court accepted. In each case I studied, he had similar foresight, allowing him to write, absent a specific time, a decision whose implications lasted far beyond that of his tenure on the court. Again, I want to thank everyone at the Center for making this summer unforgettable, as well as Professor Rabb for his guidance. I would also like to extend my thanks to everyone here for letting me occupy some of your time this evening and for your contributions that have made this summer possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela, Jacob, and Heather. And now I would like to invite our chair, Doug Eckers, to the podium to introduce our next student speaker for you.
Thank you. You know, I found out from Deborah and Savannah Moore on Saturday night that traditions take a first year to become traditions. So this is the first year of the chairman's tradition of appointing a research assistant. And so I take great pleasure in introducing Lisa Tapton to you. I tell you that Lisa was part of the intern program from Allegheny College 2 years ago, and I picked up immediately she had a little bit of a Dutch accent. Now, I'm from Clymer, and if you have a Dutch accent, you're A-OK. It doesn't mean anything about anything, but if you have a Dutch accent, it really means a great deal. And I have to tell you, Saturday at the symphony, I found out something else. As is traditional at Chautauqua Institution, there was this old man, so old he should not have been still there, being pushed into the concert. And I overheard him say to the person checking his badge, yeah, I remember the 30s here. And you know, Roosevelt was here in 1936 to deliver, I had this editorially, the I Hate War speech at the amphitheater. And you know what? He took a Jeep around the golf course to play 9 holes of golf. So to add to other Chautauqua traditions, I have to tell you that Roosevelt invented the first golf cart at Chautauqua Golf Course in 1936. So please make sure that word gets to Tom Becker and John Schmidt. But he was a Dutchman too, and so when I found Lisa as a potential assistant, I thought, well, this would be really fun to have her explore her own background a little bit, because one of the people who was hung at Nuremberg in the judgment in 1946 was the Governor General of the Netherlands, Arthur Seyss-Inquart, who was convicted for all of the crimes against humanity that the others were as well. So I wanted to ask Lisa if she could find out what role the Dutchman played at the Nuremberg trials. So Lisa is still working on the project. Lisa Tapton from Allegheny College.
Good evening, everyone. Just like Dr. McPherson said, I have a little bit of a Dutch accent, so I'm not going to be able to pronounce my THs, but just bear with me. I'm also from Allegheny College, where I study French and International Studies. I'm a rising senior, and this summer I want to explore my own Dutch roots and find a connection to Nuremberg. So the actual details as to how I got my topic are the book A Roller Coaster Ride. I'll spare you all these details. But eventually I stumbled upon Dutch collaborators, which is a topic generally ignored by the Dutch public and history books. Yep. Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, better. I can hear myself echo. So I talked at my research about Dutch collaborators this summer. Dutch collaborators were a really big part of Dutch World War II history. They're just generally ignored. The thing is that everyone sees the Dutch as being very heroic and brave during the World War II effort. they portray themselves in this manner as well. This is called the Dutch paradox. So I stumbled on this, and generally speaking, the Dutch paradox refers to how, the Dutch are very accepting of people, and they clearly would have done lots of things for the Jews during World War II, but that this actually isn't true. That's a paradox, to contrast how they portray themselves and what actually happened. In order to ignore the truth of this, because obviously it's not the most positive thing, they created this new war narrative. They said that they were these brave, brave people. They all suffer together. Okay, thank you. They all suffer together, and this actually isn't true, because as it turns out, the Netherlands have the highest rate of collaboration in Europe. So I wanted to find out, who were these collaborators, and why are their stories hidden? So as it turns out, after the war, they rewrote the war narrative, and they divided the entire country into a box of either right or wrong. So I'm asking myself the question, is everyone going to fit into these boxes? And eventually I decided that I needed a case study, and I came across Dutch media, which was completely inundated with collaborators. And as it turns out, the Germans could never have taken over the Dutch media to the extent that they did, the Dutch press, without Dutch collaborators. So I focused on 3 individuals. Their names were Arie Meijer-Schwenke, Toby Goedewagen, and Max Boxeil. And I explored what they did during the war, how they helped to orchestrate the German occupation. And I wanted to see what their motivations were, why they did these things, and whether the way that the Dutch had been portraying themselves as these heroes was actually accurate in this light of that everyone was either good or bad. What I found out was that their motivations were very varied. Some simply wanted recognition, some wanted money, but all of them had their good sides and their bad sides. One man, even though he basically reorganized the entire press, worked with his brother, who was a resistance member, and saved countless lives. So clearly, you can't say that they fit into the right or wrong box. So I kept going through this, and I couldn't place anyone in this box. And then I came to a conclusion that because you couldn't, trials that happened after the war to these collaborators, similar to Nuremberg, which in Dutch is called the Bezoekende, they're really inaccurate representations of history and how history is portrayed. And that we should all ask ourselves questions of, what makes people tick, and can we really use laws in order to tell the story of what happened during the war. Basically, I came to the conclusion that in order to tell an accurate story of what happens during the war, you need to humanize people, not dehumanize them. So the question that I want to leave everyone here with in this very brief presentation of a very complicated subject is whether we can really use things such as Nuremberg or International Criminal Court to write our history and to help us decide who is good and who is bad, how to fix those things. That is everything I wanted to say, so thank you.
I think you've seen through these presentations how wonderful a group of college students we've had working with us this summer, and it's been a delight for us all to have them with us at the center. And now, for a person who needs no introduction at all, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Greg Peterson.
This will shock you. I will try to be brief. So I know the mind can absorb only what the rear can endure. And I want to just quickly introduce myself as Greg Peterson. I'm from Allegheny College, and I'm a rising old-timer. Susan asked me to talk about the past and the future and where we see the Robert H. Jackson Center. I'm a firm believer you got to know where you came from to know where you're going to. And that could take days on end, and in fact, Kathy Crocker, though not here, she's in the process of writing a book on that whole subject. But just quickly, Reader's Digest. On December 14th, 2000, a meeting was held at my office with Carl Kappa, Betty Lene, Tom Cardman, Phil Morris, and the conception of a Robert H. Jackson Center was obtained. Actually, 4 of them patted me on the head and said, carry on, good luck, with an idea that maybe there might be a storefront someplace where we could just set up some panels. Shortly thereafter, through the judicial intervention of Judge Willard Cass, we ended up buying the Robert H. Jackson Center, which was formerly the Scottish Rite Consistory. A long story unto itself. We became incorporated in March 23rd, 2001, 15 years ago. And on May 1st, 2001, we had our first event. Boom, boom, boom. From literally conception, purchase of real estate, to have an event which we had the biographer of Robert Jackson, Eugene Gerhardt, there, and it was a huge, very successful event. From that time, we've had that wonderful opportunity to convince our community that we're viable, that we're relevant, and we challenged ourselves on the great heritage of Robert Jackson. I'm going to treat today, which is the Robert H. Jackson Society meeting, sort of our annual report to the stakeholders since last year. Much has happened. We have a new chair, Doug Neckers. We have a new executive director, Susan Murphy. We have a relatively new staff, which, by the way, consists of nothing but females. That's the new woman power thing. I am making no political statement. Nevertheless, that is fact. And we have new board members, and many of them Susan had already mentioned. And we're thrilled by all these activities. I also want to pause and recognize that we have some members of the board who termed out, and they are Randy Sweeney, Willard Cass, and John Anderson. If we could give them a hand. And there's a reason why we're not asking them to come up and to talk, for fear that they would talk about literally 15 years of dealing with me. And that is not anything I wanted to have happen. During this past year, we've also lost some friends. And among them, Chief Judge Judith Kay, a fellow board member, who was the first female chief judge of the New York State Court of Appeals. She passed away. Ernest Michel, who was an oft-time visitor to the Jackson Center, and he had the unique story of being a Holocaust survivor from Auschwitz, who subsequently became a reporter at the Nuremberg trial, covering the prosecution of those who perpetrated the Jews and eliminated his family. Unbelievable story. We lost a couple of local media folks who, in various ways, assisted in us. Jim Riggs handled a lot of our activities here, and Jim Roselli. We all know Jim Roselli, just an icon, but no bigger fan than Jim Roselli. Personally, I lost my mother, who was my biggest fan of the Jackson Center, Gladys Peterson, and Ed Tomasini's dad, Jeff, who Ed's been with us, literally the first speech we ever did in February of 2001. Ed filmed it, and so Jeff had to deal with Ed playing with us, so we lost those. And also, Justice Scalia. Justice Scalia. Justice Scalia was a fan of Robert Jackson. Justice Scalia sat in the Robert H. Jackson seat. What's that mean? What that means is that when Jackson died in 1954, John Marshall Harlan took his spot. When John Marshall Harlan died, William Rehnquist, Jackson's clerk, took his spot. Rehnquist then became chief judge. Who took that vacancy? Scalia. We talked to Justice Scalia a couple years ago about coming here and speaking, which he agreed to do. We couldn't find the schedule, and so he, unfortunately, that isn't obviously not going to happen, but he was a fan. And he's, as far as the Jackson Center is concerned, he will be certainly missed. From that first Gerhardt program, we've had 15 years, and it's just a blur right now, of activity, which has included Supreme Court justices of the like of Rehnquist, Roberts, Ginsburg, O'Connor, Solicitor Generals, Attorney Generals, Nuremberg prosecutors, Nuremberg personnel. We've had Newbery Award-winning authors with the assistance of Anita Sanctuary. We've had the best of the best. We've had Emmy Award-winning folks like Phil Donahue, Academy Award-winning folks like Bud Schulberg. We've had law clerks of Jackson. We've had the current chief prosecutors of all the tribunals. all of which have come here, and I can tell you they've come here at virtually no cost. George Murphy, don't listen to this part of the story, please. But they've come because they tipped their hat to Robert Jackson. They have come because they feel like they want to do something to advance the legacy of Justice Jackson, and for that, I'm absolutely thrilled. Since the past year, we had Lawrence Tribe here, probably the foremost Supreme Court constitutional lawyer. We had the 9th International Law Dialogue. We've had teacher fellows who were here from under the guidance of Drew Bider and Joe Carp, and we've got quality programming which became part of our webpage. A thing we haven't really talked much about, we talked about today, is the New York State Regents has a core curriculum. And a year ago, through some great work internally, the New York State Regents adopted as one of its core curriculum in 10th grade to study in all history classes. They must study Robert H. Jackson and his impact from the Nuremberg trial. The Nuremberg opening statement, the closing statement. That's spectacular. That's a big deal. And for teachers out there to have the fact that this has to be taught in New York State, where are they going to get that information from? The Jackson Center. New York State is in fact one of those templates that is used throughout the country where they can get that information from us. That's a big deal. We've had a variety of exhibits, a variety of programs here. Warren, in fact, this slideshow that Heather put together is fantastic. An awful lot has happened this past year, and an awful lot will happen in the near future. And we've had at Chautauqua here, and I want to pause and thank Chautauqua Institution, who's been very supportive and very helpful. We've had 12 years of Robert H. Jackson lectures here, along with additional ones. Tracy Mears was just our most recent one recently. Well, we had a couple of events this past year, which are ones that I'm very, very proud of. As you drove into Jamestown, New York, the Mass, many years down North Main Street, and you come to Love School at the corner of 8th and Main, you are saluted by a statue of Robert H. Jackson. That's been there since 1996, dedicated by Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. For a variety of reasons, we were able at the Robert Jackson Center to obtain ownership, title, and with the support of all the original foundations who supported that, I see Lil back there with the Gebby Foundation, all encouraged it, we were permitted to take the statue and put it on the front lawn of the Robert H. Jackson Center, and for those who've driven by, it's a beacon. It's spectacular. And on October 29th, we're going to have a rededication of that, and it's going to be, you'll all be invited. It's a big, big event that evening where a lot of the family members, Father Fuchs, other people are coming in for that event. But the Jackson Center, the Jackson statue relocation was a very big deal. In April, we, the Robert Jackson Center, were honored by the International March of the Living, which is a international body of Jewish philanthropists who have taken upon themselves for the last 20 years to encourage ecumenical trips from high school students to go to Poland, Auschwitz, Birkenau, and then to go to Israel. A phenomenally successful thing. Well, this year they decided they would honor, and the day before, in an event, an organization which enhanced and advanced education of the Holocaust, and they honored the 70th anniversary of the Nuremberg trial. They had a whole day-long symposium on that. We were honored with a Shofar Award, which was the first of its kind, and I was there to receive it, and that was a big deal for us, because it was a recognition of what we've accomplished, which you all have accomplished. I mean, this is not me. This is you, and your support have accomplished at the Jackson Center, and has been recognized by a very high-end international group, and they have followed up and followed through in the last many months, so that we'll be doing some exceptional programming with them in the next few years, including potentially the Jackson Center sort of being a quasi-Aspen Institute. I didn't say that, so nobody mark that down. Did I say that? I'm not supposed to say it. I didn't say it. I slipped, so don't take notes. In addition, we've entered into this past year with a memorandum of understanding with St. Bonaventure University. we have always had wonderful relationships with Harvard, Yale, Georgetown, doing great collaborative events, including Nuremberg. But this is really the first time where a reputable, highly reputable four-year institution has come forward and has entered into a formal agreement which programming, which academic institutional activities, and I sat next to, and I didn't know I was sitting next to Monica Mattioli, and I think she wished she hadn't let me sit next to her when I asked, is it okay for me to sit there? Because she is the Executive Director of Alumni Affairs at St. Bonaventure, and sorry Cindy, I didn't spend much time talking to you, but it's all about Monica at St. Bonaventure. So we have a lot of things planned out. That's a big deal. Looking forward, hopefully all of you got in your packet, or will get, on August 21st, at the Chautauqua Suites, just up the road, an evening with Mark Russell. Mark Russell is willing to do this as a benefit for the Robert Jackson Center, which is great. We did it last year, we had a huge turnout, and Mark said, gee, if I can just get enough information, I'll be glad to do it again this year. So Mark actually went on a field trip. He went to the DNC and the RNC, both of them, to make sure he had enough material for that night. I think he's got it. So that's something I hope you all come enjoy, as that's just going to be a great evening. We do annually go to the Robert H. Jackson Federal Courthouse. Another great thing over the past years, the United States Federal Courthouse in Buffalo, the beacon, and that little temple is now named after Robert H. Jackson. It's the Robert H. Jackson Federal Courthouse. Now they do Constitution Day programs, and they bring in the Robert H. Jackson themes, and they have put up a wonderful plaque. They have a fantastic bust of Robert Jackson. They've done a lot, and again, we're going to be doing a program on September 16th. I hope, and I see Arnie and Jill and Louie and Kitty were here, we just left, who joined us 10 years ago, I think it was, on a trip to Nuremberg. And we're going to do that again on the 70th. So Stan and Sarah were there as well. It was a hoot. Well, this year we're going back on September 28th, and we're joining, John Barrett's going to do a master class, and we're going to incorporate what's going on with the 10th International Humanitarian Law Dialogue, so that all of the chief prosecutors of all the tribunals are going to be there as part of our programming, and we part of theirs. And it concludes on the Friday evening in the courthouse, where the state of Bavaria is going to have a big event, and we're all part of it. So consider it. That's going to be a 3-day event, and of course then from there you can do whatever you see fit. I'm going to conclude. This has been a magical 15 years. We are celebrating our 15th birthday. So we're still young, and we're definitely a work in progress. And the excitement for me was listening to our fellow students, and that's our future. It's not Doug and me, even though we like to think otherwise. That's not it. It's the reality is those students, the programmings we have, and the fact of this education. And we're building something here these past 15 years, whether it's archives, whether it's programming, whether it's excitement, or, we, for example, have 5 million hits on our YouTube site. 5 million hits. We've raised, in the past 15 years, over $10 million. And we've got over thousands of hours of documented interviews and transcripts at the Jackson Center. Much has happened. In fact, I see Randy Sweeney over there, who thinks he's a has-been, but as I told him, it's better to be a has-been than it never was. So Randy and the Community Foundation, we have more funds at the Community Foundation designated to benefit the Robert Jackson than I think any not-for-profit in the area. Am I correct? Good. It's good. I don't know if you said yes or no. That's good. But that's exciting. We've had great things happening this past 15 years. But we're like any other not-for-profit. We have operating needs, operating opportunities, and you folks have always been there, and we look forward to continuing that support in many, many ways. And I suspect you'll hear some of that from Cole and Doug carrying on. So with that, I thank you. It's been a spectacular 15 years. I look forward to many years ahead. I'm thrilled with all of the activities that our educational opportunities have presented themselves, and I look forward to catching up. And if you have any questions, as Susan said, of any of the board members, I'll introduce you to them as we leave tonight. Otherwise, thank you.
That's just a little taste of why I am so excited to go to work every day. Love working with Greg. We're attached at the hip, and that's the way it should be. And when he starts to get that little twinkle in his eye, you know you better hold on for the roller coaster ride. Next on our program is our immediate past chair of the Development Committee, Cole Stearns, and he will speak about our annual fund campaign and the Jackson Ambassador Program.
This is really great. First of all, once again, I have to follow Greg Peterson. Secondly, for you Chautauquans, I stand between you and whatever the wonderful evening events are. Third, as I'm sure you can surmise from my introduction, my role is really to ask you for money. So the combination of all of that is really the triple whammy, maybe. Every time I speak to this very wonderful group, they put me right after Greg Peterson. And so driving over here tonight, I don't know how I had this I remembered this, but there was a quote that was reported from the Republican National Convention. I did not hear it spoken, but I did read it. There was a speaker that was placed right next to Ivanka Trump. And he, as I'm told, as he took the podium, he says, "I feel like the anchovy on Ivanka Trump's Caesar salad." And, you know, I'm kind of feeling that way with Greg, and always having to follow him. But anyway, it is very nice. Whatever the image you have of that, very nice to be here. So, quickly, how many of you out there are chess enthusiasts? Any of you? Yes, chess. Okay, well, even with that tepid response, I'm going to stay with my chess analogy here. A couple years ago, there was a debate as to whether a computer could beat a grandmaster at chess. And people went back and forth on this. So I don't know where all this stands today, but this preeminent chess grandmaster or authority said the computer is ultimately going to be able to beat a grandmaster, and maybe in fact it now has happened. But the computer will never understand the soul of the position. And that thought has stayed with me for years. Now, not being a chess aficionado, I can only put it in a limited perspective, but I can envision that you have a chess board with the pieces on the board laid out and whatever. And perhaps they're in a position that in the world-famous chess match of whenever it was, Bobby Fischer and Boris Spassky back in the tournament of the century, this was the incredible offense, the position of the men, you know, that incredible offense, whatever it is. Obviously, I'm not the chess guy, but that's what struck me, is that here is a totally objective situation. You've got a chessboard with the men, and the idea is there's a deeper meaning, at least in the chess world, to the position of the men on the board, the soul of the position. So what that said to me, I think the reason why it stayed with me, is that I think there's a lot of areas in life where you can look at things objectively, and yet there's a deeper significance to what you're looking at, whatever the facts are. The chess players are on the board, da-da-da-da, that's the objective scenario, but what is the deeper meaning behind it? So, let's just briefly look at the chessboard of the Jackson Center.
What are the pieces on the board? Greg very eloquently laid out a number of them for you. First of all, you've got the wonderful facility in Jamestown with its auditorium, with its exhibits, with its permanent exhibits. You've got the wonderful staff. You've got splendid interns that humble me. And you've got a wonderful board under the leadership now of a very impassioned chairman, Doug Neckers. You've got Greg Peterson, who for 15 years has tirelessly promoted the Jackson Center, and I could go on and on and on. You also have each of you as key supporters of the center. All of you, all of these, maybe we refer to them as assets. Tonight my analogy is the chess players on the board. But all of these make up the fabric of the Jackson Center. They contribute to the pedigree of the Jackson Center. So, you probably see where I'm leading you with this analogy. What's the soul of the position with the Jackson Center pieces on the board? What's the deeper significance of all of these great things? Well, I can only answer it for me, for my wife, for us. The deeper significance is that the Jackson Center is changing lives. Any of you that were here last year heard teachers stand here and say that the educational initiatives of the Jackson Center are playing a role in transforming school-age kids into more civically responsible individuals, more sensitive individuals to a lot of the themes that Jackson espoused. They're coming out with changed behavior as they have been impacted by the Jackson Center initiatives. On the international law front, the thought leadership that the Jackson Center provides has the potential to make a meaningful difference in the whole area of international criminal justice that can impact countless individuals around the world. So I encourage each of you to answer the question for yourself, as only you can. What do you see as the soul of the Jackson Center's position? And I hope that you will find a deeper meaning to all these nice things, the function, the building, the great programming. You'll find a deeper meaning that is worth vibrantly supporting. Because without your support, it's just a concept. The deeper meaning, the soul of our position is just an idea that's out there. For it to be real, for it to be for it to have legs and traction, it needs your support. Very briefly, and I promise this is very brief, we have undertaken a new initiative this year that's very exciting. We've inaugurated an ambassador program where the Jackson Center is going to enlist individuals in key cities of the country to serve as a quote-unquote ambassador for the center in those locations. The role of an ambassador is to be kind of a lead liaison, lead focal point, represent the Jackson Center, maybe convene a yearly function in that location. And I'm really pleased that as of actually today, we now have 2 ambassadors that are going to be in place. First, in Erie, Pennsylvania, where I am from, we have a wonderful friend of mine and a very prominent lawyer named Tom Tupitza, who is the managing partner of the Knox Law Firm in Erie. And he is a Harvard Law graduate that, I want to make sure I get this right, he was executive editor of the Harvard Civil Rights and Civil Liberties Law Review when he was there. He's been a longtime friend of the center, wonderful individual, and I literally just today over lunch got his confirmation. Secondly, we have an individual from Washington, D.C. now, named Paul Williams, who is a professor at American University. David Crane, our past chairman, knows him very well, and he is the co-founder of the Public International Law and Policy Group, which is a pro bono legal group that represents states and countries in providing thought leadership on war crimes prosecutions, post-conflict constitutions, prosecutions, and peace negotiations. A wonderful, extremely prominent individual. Hopefully we're going to have somebody in place in New York soon and pivotal cities around the country. Thank you for your support, and that's it.
And now for some closing remarks from our chair, Doug Neckers.
Thank you very much. And I am going to be brief because I don't want to compete with Gilbert and Sullivan if I have to. In any event, thank you very much for coming. I want to thank particularly the staff at the Jackson Center, Sue Murphy and Marion Beckering, who decided that this was a good place for the annual Jackson Society Board, Jackson Society meeting. One of the things that Susan and I have undertaken with a great deal of energy is to try and put the Jackson Center on financial stable ground. I'm a businessman after being a university professor for many years, and I know that there are three legs to being a successful not-for-profit, in spite of the fact that we don't like to understand that we do need the government. We do need the government, so the government's one of those legs. A second of those legs is the universities, which we have just begun to tap the universities in the region, and that, as you see through the students who are here, is an incredibly important next step for the future of the region, is to get a research university strongly involved with the Robert Jackson Center. And the third thing is where you and I can contribute, and that's to the notion of a major endowment campaign that we will try and begin as this year proceeds. Endowment makes possible those things that we cannot do on our own, and in spite of the fact that the Jackson Center is very proud of being able to do things on a nickel, it would be a lot easier if they had $1. So it would be very well if we could work hard to help the Jackson Center move to the time of having a substantial endowment to support those programs that are going on. And you'll be hearing about that as the time progresses. But I would like to say again, to all of our board members, to all of our students, and particularly to this very hardworking staff, thank you so much for making this organization what it is. Greg could brag for an hour or 2 hours or 5 hours about all the programs, but I have to tell you that every single one of those programs come off because the people that are in Jamestown make it happen. So those people who work hard at the Jackson Center deserve our applause, deserve our strong support, and when you're down there, pat them on the back and thank the volunteers, thank the docents, thank anybody that's there for their efforts on behalf of Jamestown and on behalf of the Jackson Center to make this little corner of the world the place that one gets off the Thruway for or one gets off Interstate 86 for between, let's say, 90, Cleveland, and maybe Buffalo. Thank you very much for coming. We enjoyed having you all.